headlines are everywhere. Tea Party dead on arrival. Tea Parties racked with infighting, confusion, dissent. Tea Partiers eat their own in bitter internal feud. Is it true? Is it true? Tonight, I've invited representatives from several groups to sort it out because I believe our republic is at stake. And this isn't, for me at least, this isn't about politics. I could care less about the Republican Party. I could care less about the Democratic Party. I care about the country that is going to either be here or not be here for my children. I think you feel the same way. And if they are arguing with each other, you know what? The republic is lost. Because these are the people that have stood up and said, I'll lead because nobody else will. I'll lead. Well, a leader needs to recognize the time in which we are living and not waste opportunities. In the fight to save the republic, we must come together. I have them here on the set, and we're going to talk to them in a minute. But first, I want to get back to the movement action plan, MAP, that I told you about earlier this week. We've covered some pretty heavy stuff, but this, my gosh, I'm stuck in the 1960s. Heavy stuff, man. This was actually something that came out of the 70s, and it was designed by a guy, he was a progressive, named Bill Moyer. This was actually designed for the people that were standing up and saying, no nukes in America. And he had noticed that when the activists were trying to stop the government from following through on their goal to create 1,000 new nuclear plants by the turn of the century, they had really made some progress, but they all thought they had failed because the government was still going on and nobody was listening to them, even though public opinion had turned, even though some members of the press were starting to go on their side. Most of the press and the administration was against them, and they were discouraged. And so he went back to his hotel and he put this together. He looked at the commonalities of all of the protest movements, and he provided a map to follow. Now, again, this was created for the left. I'm showing you this because they know this. But you most likely are somebody that's worked your whole life. You haven't been out, you know, like in sandals and a tie-dye shirt and a sign going, down with the man. They've studied this stuff. What can we learn from them? Well, he knew that creating social change required a group effort. And he laid out 8 stages within this plan. Stage number 5 is where I believe we are. Perception of failure. A sense of powerlessness, an identity crisis. You think you've lost. This is also an extraordinarily dangerous period. This is the period, quite honestly, where the Weather Underground went violent. This is the stage where the SDS created the Weather Underground that went violent, and SDS created Radke, the people that gave us Acorn. They took a peaceful route. The others took a violent route. This is the stage. This is the stage when huge success is occurring, but people begin to doubt whether they've had any success at all. They feel, and I know this is happening in the country, I've been to Washington 3 times. I've called everybody I know in Washington. We've had group meetings, everything. And they feel they're making no progress because the administration is ignoring them. This is the stage, I believe, where the Tea Party is at right now. It happens in every political movement, whether it's left or right, a feeling of frustration, and people begin to dismantle it. People begin to fight with each other, and violence can come out from members here. Well, our founders understood this. Back in the 1700s, George Whitefield, who you probably hadn't heard of, we talked about on this program. George Whitefield tried to bring the divided 13 colonies together. This was Benjamin Franklin. Join or die. Well, Whitefield, he preached his father Abraham's sermon. The colonies didn't like each other. They didn't like each other before the Revolution. They were very much independent and separate entities. They did not want to join. They all had different agendas. Well, for 40 years, Whitefield traveled across this country to deliver a sermon to get those colonies to set aside their differences and unite on what they shared in common. It's the beginning of the melting pot, e pluribus unum. A thirst for freedom is what they wanted. Well, the text of that sermon was recorded by John Adams, and in a nutshell, it went something like this. He goes to heaven, Whitefield goes to heaven, and he says, Father Abraham, Are there any Presbyterians in heaven? And the answer comes back, no Presbyterians. Father Abraham, are there any Episcopalians in heaven? No, no Episcopalians. Are there any Quakers? Or are there any Baptists or Methodists in heaven? No, none. Father Abraham, who is in heaven? The answer, he said, Christians. With that sermon, he helped the colonists see themselves as a single people with one divine destiny coming together for the larger cause. We have differences. Historians now tell us that if Whitefield had not done what he did, the colonies would never have been able to be united and been able to fight Great Britain as one. Samuel Adams later put Whitefield's message into practice. It was Congress, September 1774. A motion was offered to open the First Continental Congress with prayer. Well, these people disagreed with each other on theological issues like crazy, and it was important to each of them. That simple request met stiff resistance. Some of the most devout Christians among the delegates said, absolutely not. I can't pray. Who are we going to have to lead us? He's a Quaker. I'm an Episcopalian. Never. Well, here it is. First day of Congress. They couldn't join together in the simple act of worship with one another. Samuel Adams, a man of profound faith, broke through the objections. He arose, and what he said was, quote, I'm no bigot. I can hear a prayer from a gentleman of piety and virtue who was at the same time a friend to his country. Then Samuel Adams invited Jacob Duché, who was as far away from Sam Adams' religion as possible, an Episcopal clergyman. He said, you lead it. You lead the prayer. Well, they not only ended up praying together, but having a Bible study that some say lasted 2 hours, coming together, standing together, putting aside what divides and focusing instead on what unites, with this caveat. In this box comes violence, comes rebels, comes danger, comes racism, comes whatever, comes Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground. You must stand together, but there are things that you reject, but as a united front. Let me introduce the guests. Mark Skoda, he's a co-founder of the National Tea Party Federation. Jenny Beth Martin is a co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She's also one of the 100 most influential people in the world, according to Time magazine. And she's a national coordinator. Matt Kibbe is the president of FreedomWorks. Yvonne Donnelly is the national chair of the 912 Project. We will also talk to a representative from Tea Party Express a little later on in the program. You guys were all invited because you four here and the one on the telephone are the 5 biggest groups in America. And does everybody agree with the concept that we are at a crucial point?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Are the headlines true? There's infighting that everybody's coming apart and...
No, I think actually just the opposite's happening. I think with this election cycle, Glenn, what we're seeing is extraordinary animation of activism. People are getting out, they're putting flyers out, they're working together. You know, our state of Tennessee has over 60 Tea Party leaders who have endorsed a single gubernatorial candidate through a caucus. And we're now promoting that candidate. We're working together to elect that candidate. I think people are really focused right now about getting the job done. And certainly, even across our region in Mississippi and Arkansas, we've worked with other Tea Party leaders. And with this group, of course, I think provide and lend a sensibility.
I want to get into a little later some of the negatives, because there are negatives and there are cries of racism from the other side, and even within the Tea Party saying, wait a minute. Racism is happening here, and you're rejecting it. You, in particular, are on the leading.
Tea Party Patriots won't put up with racism anywhere.
Okay, so, and that's great, and nor should we. There is a great danger. So I want to first, before we go to the things that you can unite on to stand against, what are the things that you can unite on to stand for? What are the, for instance, is it fair to say education,